On tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas War, day 149, Hamas delivered its answer to negotiators without addressing Israel's demands for the hostage deal. Israel declared the negotiations have broken down. The IDF expanded its ground activity in the Hamad region in Khan Yunis today. Palestinians were seen evacuating by the thousands as IDF tanks engulfed the region. Reports that in the IDF's assassination yesterday in Lebanon, Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah's grandson was killed. Elizabeth Sorkov, Israeli who was kidnapped by an Iraqi militia last year, reportedly has been moved within Iraq to a new location. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris calls for a truce that will return hostages and lay the foundation for Palestinian dignity, freedom, and self-determination. Hello everyone, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It is currently the evening of March 3rd, 2024 in the United States, the morning of March 4th, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, Hamas returned its answer to the Egyptian negotiators regarding the Paris framework and did not address the two things that Israel demanded. One of these was a formula for how many Palestinian prisoners would be released for each Israeli hostage. Israel wanted this negotiated up front before entering into the technical details of the truce. And the other was a list of which hostages are alive and which are dead. While the list of live hostages was added as a condition by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu after the Paris Agreement, the formula was required as part of the Paris Agreement in order to move forward to the final stage of negotiations. Hamas's answer in turn reiterated the group's demands that the deal include a complete freedom of movement of Palestinians throughout the Gaza Strip, including to the northern parts of the Strip, substantial increase in the entrance of humanitarian aid, and a complete ceasefire and IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. A senior Hamas official was quoted in CNN today stating that if Israel accepts Hamas's demands, a ceasefire and hostage exchange can begin within the next 24 to 48 hours. Al-Arabi al-Jadid quoted sources stating that after receiving Hamas's answer, Egypt sees Hamas's demands as legitimate. While Al-Arabi al-Jadid does quote these sources, it's noteworthy it's unclear who the sources are, or in fact if they are Egyptian. And I say this because other sources today also quoted both officials from Qatar and Egypt, saying that the countries applied immense pressure on Hamas to at least answer regarding the formula question of prisoners in exchange for hostages, even if they want to state an unrealistic number, in order to allow negotiations to begin between the sides. However, they were disappointed by Hamas's response. Israel publicly stated that negotiations have collapsed and that Hamas has decided to ignite the region during the month of Ramadan, although behind the scenes the country is reportedly applying pressure on the United States, asking for massive pressure to be put on Hamas via Qatar and Egypt, listing facets such as expelling Hamas's leaders from Qatar, shutting down bank accounts and other things like that as a way to possibly get out of the current deadlock. NBC also quoted Israeli sources stating that while things seem right now completely hopeless for a hostage deal, there is still hope to reach a breakthrough in the next week before Ramadan. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there were no rockets or mortars sent from the Gaza Strip towards Israel in the last 24 hours. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, the IDF reported concluding its operation in the Zeitoun area of Gaza City, stating that it has achieved operational control of the region. The IDF reported that during the two-week operation, over 100 terror operatives were killed. In addition, it stated that between this operation and similar focused operations in Darj Tufah, Beit Lahia, as well as Rimal, over 150 targets, including rocket launching sites, weapons manufacturing areas, tunnel entrances, weapons warehouses, and operational apartments used by Hamas were destroyed. The IDF also stated that Hamas is trying to combine different units in the area in order to develop new battalions in the north. This comes amidst other reports from already a month ago that Hamas is not only trying to redevelop its civil administration in the north, activating its different police units, but also is trying to combine the different units from the areas of Sajaiya, Gaza City, Zeitoun, in order to rebuild new battalions after those have been effectively dismantled by the IDF operation. Amidst this, the Al-Quds brigades of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad reported battles with IDF soldiers in the southern areas of Zeitoun today, in addition to reporting that they targeted IDF soldiers with mortars near the Nusirat or Netzarim corridor. In addition, earlier in the day, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade reported targeting IDF soldiers with snipers in the Zeitoun area, stating that one IDF soldier was killed. One final report regarding to the north, in Jabalia refugee camp, there were substantial bombings noted throughout the day. The IDF is not operating ground units in Jabalia refugee camp right now. However, this may be in preparation for another quote-unquote targeted operation that will occur in Jabalia. Moving on to the central parts of the Gaza Strip, Mahmoud Muhammad Abed Haj, a senior Hamas leader and the person who's in charge of recruitment for Hamas in general and for the Zeitoun battalion in particular, was assassinated today. Reportedly, he was targeted from the air in the central camps of the Gaza Strip. Possibly relating to this, Palestinian sources stated that there were major bombings that were carried out at the Al-Nusairat refugee camp and 12 people were killed and dozens were wounded. And another attack was reported in the Deir al-Balah area targeting a van. 8 people were killed in this attack. It's not clear which of these may have been the assassinations. Sources in Gaza stated that the van in Deir al-Balah was carrying a sign stating that it was transporting humanitarian aid, however was still targeted by 2 missiles. Likely one of these attacks was that assassination, however it was not reported by the IDF or Palestinian sources where exactly that assassination took place. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, in Khan Yunis, that's where the bulk of the fighting remains, more details are coming out about the IDF's intense and surprise invasion of the Hamad city region. This is the northern parts of Khan Yunis. Reportedly, this began yesterday. According to some reports, the operation opened with a massive bombardment of fire belt attacks of over 50 air raids within 6-minute time frame, attacking underground infrastructure, Hamas military structures, lookout posts, booby-trapped structures, and Hamas gathering points. Artillery fire was also noted at the same time as the IDF, again in a surprise move, poured into this region. In reports from today, local sources stated that IDF tanks have surrounded Hamad and erected batteries around it as well. Later pictures circulated of massive Palestinian evacuation from this region. It was reported early in the day that drones had called on people to stay in their homes in this area. However, from the pictures, it actually looks like this is an organized evacuation, so likely the IDF gave new instructions to the people to organize an evacuation, likely towards the El Mawasi area. However, we may find out more about this tomorrow. In the most southern city of the Gaza Strip in Rafah, there were several substantial bombings reported throughout the day. This is the second day in a row that major bombings are reported in Rafah. Reportedly, in the eastern part of the city, at least one of the bombings were in the El Janina area, targeting a 3-story building. A total of 18 people reported killed in these bombings, including 6 children. Other news related to the Gaza Strip. While visiting the elite IDF Unit 98 today, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant stated that the only thing currently being debated is what to deal with first and what to deal with second, and that there are no questions regarding if things will be dealt with. He stated, and I quote, "We will not end the war without destroying Hamas. Hamas as a governing structure will no longer exist, no matter how long it takes." Regarding casualties, 1 IDF soldier is reported killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began to 246. 6 IDF soldiers reported injured in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began to 1,453. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting that 90 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 30,410. 71,700 Palestinians reported injured in the Gaza Strip, and there are still several thousand that are buried under the rubble and presumed dead. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip reported that in the last several days, at least 15 children have died in the Kamal Adwan hospital, this is in the areas of Beit Lahia, as a result of malnutrition and dehydration. Some of these were reported in the last several days, so likely the figure includes them, however, was not specific on which children died on which day. Concerns in their report were also raised about 6 other children that are hospitalized in that area, as a generator is reportedly collapsing and oxygen machines are therefore at risk of failure. In addition, Hamas's Ministry of Communications put out a statement criticizing the humanitarian paradropping missions of aid in the last several days, stating that they are limited, increased chaos as they force 2.4 million people to rush around to find aid, and that they are used to cover up for countries who will continue to support Israel and continue to support the war. Other news, the U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris stated today that what we are seeing in Gaza every day is absolutely devastating, explicitly stating that too many innocent Palestinians have been killed, and referencing the aid truck incident as yet another example of this, stating that people were trying to get to aid and were met with gunfire and chaos. She added that people are starving, conditions are inhumane, and stating that our humanity compels us to act. In turn, she called upon the Israeli government to do more to significantly increase the flow of aid, stating that there could be no excuses as to why this is not done. Other news, the IDF coordinator of activities in the Palestinian territories announced today that 50 incubators destined for hospitals in the Gaza Strip entered Gaza today. Among the hospitals that they will be delivered to includes Al Shifa and Kamal Adwan in the north, the European Hospital, Al Aqsa Hospital in the central parts of the Strip, and Nasser Hospital in the southern parts. Relating to the aid truck incident from a few days ago, and amidst reports that aid agencies stated that they had no knowledge of the truck convoy, New York Times published a report today citing Israeli, Palestinian, and diplomatic sources, stating that as a result of the collapse of aid distribution in the northern parts of the Strip, Israel had organized over 4 truck convoys of humanitarian aid into the northern parts of the Gaza Strip last week, coordinating their entrance with local Palestinian businessmen, several of them who are named in the report. One of these convoys is reportedly the convoy from that incident in which 120 Palestinians were killed. That is, at least according to this report, the reason that aid agencies did not know about this convoy, and also explains how the convoy was destined to end up in certain areas that had not been part of UNRWA's missions before. Relating to that incident, the IDF spokesperson stated today that the IDF, quoting, as a professional army committed to international law, will carry out a full independent investigation. He added that the initial investigation confirms what was already published by the IDF, that most of the people died as a result of trampling and being hit by trucks, and that IDF soldiers opened fire only to disperse the population, and during the chaos, some of the Palestinians approached IDF soldiers in a dangerous manner. Moving on to the West Bank, there was a Palestinian attack carried out against the IDF Salim base. This is the area near Jenin in the West Bank. Gunfire was reportedly opened at the base by a Palestinian car that was passing by. The car escaped back to Jenin. No arrests were reported. Regarding IDF activity, there was substantial IDF activity reported in several areas throughout the West Bank. However, the most intensive one was in the Tulkarem area. According to a report that came in just an hour before recording this, there was a major IDF raid going on in the several areas around Tulkarem. However, as I said, it just came in an hour ago, so we'll find out more about this likely tomorrow. Other news related to the West Bank. Israel's Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, sent a letter to Prime Minister Netanyahu complaining about what he stated was another plan to release Palestinian prisoners into the West Bank that have been held in administrative custody in Israel since October 7th. He demanded that such a release be brought before the expanded cabinet. It is important to note that while this letter was sent and made public, Israel's prison service stated that it does not know anything about any scheduled releases. This may be more of a publicity stunt. Remains to be seen. Amidst this, however, tomorrow or the next day, there's going to be a critical meeting of the security establishment in Israel with Prime Minister Netanyahu in order to discuss restrictions that are going to be placed on access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque during the month of Ramadan. As a reminder, Itamar Ben-Gvir is requiring that severe restrictions be imposed not only on Palestinians but also on Arab Palestinian citizens of Israel. The security establishment in Israel actually thinks this is a dangerous thing to do. However, Prime Minister Netanyahu has to decide with Ben-Gvir. Today, Ben-Gvir met with the chief of police in order to try to convince him to demand more restrictions, again against the positions of the IDF and the Shabak. Both of them stated today that more restrictions are what pose a security threat rather than addressing one. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, there were continuous lower-level escalations in the last several days. This is compared to what was happening in the last 2 weeks, where the situation was heating up quite a lot each day. Rockets and missiles were sent from Lebanon, targeting the areas of Metula, Rajar, Malachia, Menara, and Batzat and Shlomi. An anti-tank missile was also sent towards Metula. A drone was reportedly intercepted in the Hula Valley in Israel. Hezbollah took responsibility for 4 different incidents throughout the day, including a shooting attack at what they called a surveillance structure in the Menara area, and firing a Burstein missile towards an IDF outpost in Hanita. Regarding IDF activity, IDF warplanes reportedly attacked Hezbollah military structures and infrastructure in the Ita Ash'ab area. Other attacks reportedly targeted military infrastructures in the Kila village. Al-Manar also reported artillery fire in the villages of Itaron and Bleda, and other sources in Lebanon also reported IDF artillery fire in the area of El Hayam. Other news, the Syrian opposition radio, Voice of Capital, reported that one of the people killed in the IDF assassination of 3 members of the Imam Hussein division yesterday is Abbas Ahmed Khalil, adding that he is the grandson of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. The Voice of the Capital stated that his father is Abu Ali Noach, who is Nasrallah's personal aide. Importantly, however, this is unconfirmed by other sources, and it was even added in an Israeli news site that the IDF does not know about this family connection. However, it is also important to note that yesterday there were conflicting reports. Some reports stated that the people who died in that assassination were in fact Hezbollah members. Later it stated they were all members of the Imam Hussein division. It is possible that there is some family connection to Hassan Nasrallah, and therefore there was this confusion. However, at this point it is unconfirmed by anyone else other than that radio station. I will add, however, that radio station has been fairly accurate in its reports in recent history regarding the war. Moving on to some of the regional news. Al Arabi Al Jadid reported that Elizabeth Sorkov, who is an Israeli-Russian citizen who was kidnapped by the Hezbollah and Iraq brigades in March of 2023, has been moved from Baghdad to a different location in the country. So as a reminder, a video of her was released in November. That was her first life sign since she was kidnapped. In that video, she called for a ceasefire in Gaza and an immediate end to the siege on Gaza. Sorkov was reportedly in Iraq originally doing her doctoral work as a graduate student in Princeton and entered Iraq on her Russian passport when she was kidnapped by this militia who since has become much more involved in the war. Moving on to the political and general trends from the last 24 hours. Israel's Minister Gantz arrived in Washington, D.C. today to begin his visit. The trip has caused a major political uproar and criticism in Israel, as Prime Minister Netanyahu was infuriated that it was not coordinated or approved by him. In addition to meeting with Vice President Kamala Harris and the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, as well as Brett McGurk, Gantz has also added a meeting with Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Reportedly, Netanyahu's office instructed Israel's ambassador in the United States to not take part in Gantz's visit. One of the things that are majorly infuriating and also scaring Prime Minister Netanyahu is that among the list of things that Gantz is going to discuss with the administration, he's also going to talk about the quote-unquote day-after plans, what is going to be in the Gaza Strip, and it is very possible that the U.S. administration is starting to look at Benny Gantz as possibly an alternative to Prime Minister Netanyahu, that they'll throw their political weight behind him should Israel's government fall and Israel go to elections. Other news, Wall Street Journal reported today of disagreements between Israel and the United States regarding the mechanism that is meant to attack Hamas funding sources. While a joint task force was established between the countries after October 7th, the report states that the list of charities that Israel submitted as those that help fund Hamas, there are also many of those in the United States that the U.S. is unconvinced transfer money to Hamas rather than simply working for charity for the Gazan civilians. According to reports, this has delayed any sanctions that would be imposed against these charities, and right now the situation is at a deadlock, where the United States is not convinced by the Israeli list. Moving on to the future of the Gaza Strip. In her speech today, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris stated that given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire for at least 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table. She then added that this will allow for the release of hostages and more aid to flow into the Gaza Strip. But importantly, she also added that this will lay the foundation for building something more enduring, stating, and I quote, "To ensure Israel is secure and to respect the right of the Palestinian people to dignity, freedom, and self-determination." This concept of self-determination is what is leading to the collision between the U.S. administration and Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu and his right-wing coalition, as Netanyahu's coalition and Netanyahu himself are repeatedly stating that Israel is going to keep all security access and responsibility from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean, and they've explicitly stated that this conflicts with the idea of self-determination for the Palestinians. Other news related to the future of the Gaza Strip. The former Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority, Mohammed Shtayyeh, currently the interim Prime Minister after he resigned, met today with U.S. lawmakers in Ramallah. He called upon the U.S. to not veto a Palestinian request to be accepted as a full UN member, stating that rather than viewing recognition of a Palestinian state as an end product of an unstable process, the United States should recognize the state of Palestine as a first step towards diplomatic resolution. So this is part of the pressure that the Palestinian Authority is going to begin likely mounting on the United States, saying we are undergoing the reforms that you demanded of us in order to take responsibility for the Gaza Strip, but now it's up to you to in turn recognize that the state of Palestine exists and is under Israeli occupation in order to further the situation and compel Israel into a process of negotiation and for Israel to in turn recognize the Palestinian state. If you enjoyed these summaries, please do remember to give them a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you want to know when summaries come out. If you have questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.